Warning: the following video deals with themes of death, animal cruelty, depression, mental illness, and despair. It also contains spoilers for the 1982 British-American animated film The Plague Dogs, directed by Martin Rosen. Viewer discretion is advised.
I don't feel no pain no more. I don't feel no pain no more. I've left this cruel world behind, and I found my peace of mind. I don't feel no pain.
This movie is amazing. It's beautiful, it's heartbreaking, it's traumatizing, and I will never be able to forget it. It's a part of me forever now. If I had a street gang, we would be called the Plague Dogs. Hi. If you're out there on the internet watching creepy videos about dumb stuff like I am, then you've probably already run across a few videos concerning the 1982 animated film, The Plague Dogs. You probably already know about its dark plot that easily rivals its contemporary dark animated films like The Black Cauldron, The Secret of Nim, and yes, even Watership Down, a film made by the same writer, director, and producer as The Plague Dogs, Martin Rosen. But were you aware that this film is a hidden animated masterpiece that has been marred by poor distribution, public misperception, and lackluster advertising for decades? To the point where it's pretty much forgotten by the mainstream, and only shows up in lists of horrifying movies to traumatize your toddler with. Well, be unaware no longer, my friend, because I'm about to use all my knowledge to tell you why you should respect the Plague Dogs. Bleakness is something that shows up often in cinematic masterpieces, from the bleached white walls of Carl Theodor Dreyer's 1928 silent classic The Passion of Joan of Arc, to the semi-sepia survival saga of societal collapse that is John Hillcoat's 2009 film The Road. Like these films, the film I'm going to talk about today deals with dark and mature themes, received a limited theatrical release in the United States, as well as several edits to the final version of the film that was shown to audiences. On top of these factors, it was very unfortunately marketed directly to children, a decision that sees the film receive 1-star reviews to this day. This film is not for children, and will leave you feeling sick at times with its disturbing content, even as an adult. But you may find that its powerful message resonates with you on a deeper level than any animated film before or since. To give you an idea of the tone of this film, it opens with a dog, one of our main protagonists, being drowned as part of a stamina experiment being conducted in an animal testing facility. This dog is then revived and placed back into its kennel, apparently so the test can be conducted again the next day. At its heart, this is a story about animal rights and is a condemnation of animal testing, but it goes on to sardonically mock the media and government agencies for their combination of inaction and overreaction. However, I feel the film connects with me much more on the subject of the fallout of traumatic events on the film's characters and their struggles to overcome them, better than it communicates the horrors of animal testing, because trauma is the film's most human element, and serves best to anthropomorphize the very realistically depicted animal characters through struggling to get past the immoral and unethical things that have been inflicted on them since long before the film's start. For the uninitiated, Plague Dogs centers on 2 dogs, Ralph, a black lab mix, who we were just introduced to, and Snitter, a fox terrier who manages to help Ralph escape from an animal research laboratory early on in the story. The pair make their way into the Lake District, a region of northwest England known for its idyllic scenery and association with many famous writers and poets. The 2 dogs, traumatized by their experiences at the research laboratory, and not exactly acclimated to life outside a home or laboratory setting, find themselves struggling to survive and find meaning in their lives in a world that doesn't understand or have a place for them. They are scared by a butcher wearing the same white coat as the scientists in the laboratory, and wielding the same sharp kind of object used by those scientists. They are chased off from a home after being caught rummaging through the bins. They are berated by sheepdogs after trying and failing to mimic their behavior in order to earn the acceptance of a master that isn't theirs, the sheep farmer. Snitter finds himself unable to handle the white lines painted on roads due to his experience seeing and subsequently being blamed for the death of his former owner. His flashback sequences are explained vaguely in the film's dialogue between two human characters as being because of a surgical procedure designed to confuse the subjective and objective parts of his brain. But anyone familiar with the side effects of post-traumatic stress may find themselves seeing a parallel to be drawn here: feelings of guilt.
It's that terrier! It was his fault! The dog killed him!
We're dead, you and I. I've killed us both. I've destroyed everything.
Finding oneself filled with fear when exposed to certain triggers.
I think it could be us. We keep fairly accurate records of our animals.
And suffering from disassociation.
I'm inside my head now, and it's where I should be. I can't come out. If I do, I'll go mad again.
Ralph, on the other hand, was raised in a laboratory, and has become very cynical because of it. It would seem that his days consisted of living in a small cage, being drowned and revived at least a few times a week, and while he has the same type of aversion to water as Snitter has with roads, this is most often manifested by anger rather than fear, and Ralph doesn't seem to have the same problem with locking up when exposed to his trigger.
I can't stand the water anymore. I shut my eyes. Water comes again.
Faced with being unable to be around people and the potential of starving to death, Ralph realizes that to survive, the pair will have to... Well, I'll let the scene speak for itself, as the inclusion of the Vivaldi music and the setting that these mysterious standing stones at dusk provide make this arguably one of the film's strongest moments.
Well, the whitecoats won't come up here anyway.
No, they won't come up here. But neither will your master.
My master can't anymore. Ralph, if we don't find food soon, we'll die.
I'm not going to die. Not without a fight.
Who are you going to fight? There's no one here.
I'll fight this. But we'll have to change.
Change? Change to what?
To what we used to be. Real animals. Wild animals. We'll find food. We'll live by our teeth and kill. That's what we'll do. Kill.
Did I mention this film was dark? The second act of the film. That's right, we're only 1/3 of the way finished. The second act introduces the Todd, a smart fox with a greasy demeanor and Cockney dialect who is attracted to the pair by their brash attacks on the local sheep population, offering to help them survive and, more importantly, to teach them how to lay low in exchange for a small portion of the food they acquire. The trio goes on a montage, acquiring food in the form of multiple sheep, some chickens, and a few ducks too. However, turned off by Ralph's arrogance in bagging another sheep while he was out with Snitter getting a chicken, the Todd runs off, but shows up again to warn the pair that the local farmers have gotten wise to their schemes and have sent a hunting party after them. The trio manages to get away, this time. This is a running theme with the Todd character. They seem to come and go as they please. Later in the film, in an early scene that foreshadows the introduction of the Todd, it is sort of explained that the Todd follows the two and is constantly lurking around. So even if he isn't around, he is never far behind. Because of this, Ralph does not trust the Todd at all, and often gets into altercations with or speaks poorly of him.
Todd, wait!
Let him go. Good riddance.
But now that the locals are onto them, we are set for the infamous scene that many know this film for, thanks to countless listicles and video compilations. And while it is extremely dark, it serves to begin escalating the stakes at play against these dogs. And honestly, this kind of firearm accident is a lot more common than you would think, especially here in the United States. November 8th, day 25, starts off with Snitter waking from sleep in some kind of unseen dream, and walks off in the middle of the night while ominous music is playing. We then see Snitter walking along a stream on an idyllic autumn morning, while unseen characters somewhere far off screen discuss the research lab denying the existence of the escaped dogs. Off-screen dialogue over footage of characters traveling is a narrative device this film employs frequently, and to great effect once one becomes acclimated to this seldom used narrative tool. A man with a gun, we assume he is armed because he is hunting the dogs, sees Snitter, and begins calling him. However, this man sees and comments on the dog's visible scar, and says,
Who did that to you?
in an apparent change of heart, the man calls Snitter up to him, who excitedly jumps up to greet the man, only to have his foot catch the trigger of the gun the man was holding, killing him instantly, in a scene that isn't even the film's goriest, but is bar none one of the most soul-wrenching gut punches in animated cinema history. Right up there with the death of Bambi's mom, but with nightmarishly reversed circumstances and quite a bit more blood. Snitter runs away, completely and understandably traumatized by this event. This scene isn't just powerful because it's loud and in your face. It's powerful for the subtext of Snitter's character being the one who's looking for a new master. It's powerful for the change of heart the farmer character experiences when he sees Snitter's scar, which is actually a much more grim realization in the novel. But in spite of all of this weight on these character motivations and shifts moving towards something good, one slip up, one little mistake, and the whole world gets blown to pieces. Separated from his companion, Ralph goes out looking for Snitter. I want to take a moment here, since we are about halfway through the film, to talk about the animation we see in the following scenes as Ralph searches for Snitter. Two shots really stand out to me in this film, particularly from this sequence. The first is of Ralph howling on a mountaintop in a sort of 180 zoom that is shown almost entirely in silence, perfectly punctuating the universally lonely sound of a dog's howl at night. We then get this shot of Ralph jumping over some stacked logs. It's important to note here that this film was made in the early 80s by a very low-budget studio, and was done without the aid of computers or rotoscoping. But even without these aids, this single piece of animation stands out as one that is masterfully animated and almost too smooth, something that is nearly impossible to pull off realistically without the use of Max Fleischer's rotoscoping technique. This film also makes great use of parallax zooming and panning, which is something that you see very frequently in animation of the time period, but makes perfect sense as you watch this very landscape-heavy film. I believe the focus on the animation in this sequence particularly serves to wordlessly encapsulate the motivations of Ralph, who will stop at nothing to see his friend safe somehow, despite all odds. When he finally finds Snitter, we are given another beautifully animated monologue as we hear about the traumatic event from Snitter's perspective. The animation during this segment is one of the most impressive examples of an unbroken animated long shot the film has to offer, something the film experiments with quite a bit, but I think is best pulled off here.
Ralph, what are you doing here?
I've been searching for the past 2 days. What happened to you?
Didn't you hear it? I mean, when the air all blew to pieces. I know it's my fault, but I didn't do it on purpose.
What blew to pieces? What are you talking about?
We're dead, you and I. I've killed us both. I've destroyed everything.
Now, calm down and tell me everything.
I was coming back, and all the grass and stones in my head were very loud, sort of humming, like a strong wind. And I was on a road, like last time. He called me and smiled, and I went to him. And everything was smashed to pieces. I smashed it like I did the other time. It all comes from me, Ralph. Out of my head. I killed that man like I killed my master. That's why we're here now, like this. We'll be punished, Ralph.
They can't do anything worse than they've done already.
We then get a smooth transition into the final sequence of Act 2, as we see the silhouette of a gunman who has been hired by the lab to take out the two dogs before any embarrassment is caused to the laboratory. I want to say something about these title cards. I love them. They are not in the original release of the film, but they make the narrative feel so much more realistic and give a real sense of weight to the time that passes as these dogs struggle to survive in the wilderness. The final half of the second act begins with off-screen dialogue explaining that a journalist will be sent to Lakeland in order to investigate the possibility of escaped dogs used in medical testing. We then parallax zoom into the gas station where we spend the next several scenes. Ralph and Snitter get caught going through the bins. Ralph is able to get away, but Snitter freezes up due to his trauma and is put into a shed by the owners of the station until the police can arrive. Ralph runs off to get the help of the Todd, and they manage to help Snitter escape from one of his trauma-induced hallucinations just in the nick of time. The police arrive and begin questioning the locals, and at the same time Lynn Driver, the reporter mentioned previously, arrives at the gas station and begins talking to a scientist from the lab who showed up with the police and who explains to Lynn the nature of the experiments done on our protagonists. This is a very human-heavy scene, and we spend the majority of it watching a small Yorkshire Terrier urinating on everything and everyone in sight. We seldom ever see the faces of humans in this film, and if we do, they are often heavily obscured or distorted. This is not dissimilar to the treatment of humans in Tom and Jerry cartoons, or even adults in the Muppet Babies. However, this often comedic motif being used here during an exposition dump can be jarring upon the first viewing of this rather serious film, but makes sense when you consider how radically important to the plot and narrative every word of dialogue in sequences like this are, and how the focus in the story is always meant to be the animals and their relationships to the humans in their life. Scenes like these appear throughout the film, whether our focal point is the terrier at the gas station, a monkey in the pit of despair back at the lab, or even as we are an implied fly floating around a pub. These scenes are our only visual window into the lives of the supporting characters in this story, and it is through these scenes that we, and the general population in the Lake District, learn that the laboratory is also conducting experiments with the bubonic plague, and begin to see how and why all these negative forces are conspiring against two unassuming stray dog protagonists. This film does a lot right, and it does a lot of it wordlessly. Show don't tell is in effect as much as the expositionary dialogue, the passage of time, the maneuvering across a geographic landscape, character arcs, animal body language, the effects of weather. Everything has been thought about and fully utilized in a way that is not only realistic, but painfully believable. Act 2 ends for our trio with them looking out over a vista at the ocean far off in the distance, foreshadowing the film's ending. The trio continues to survive out in the wild, but end up parting ways due to another spat between Ralph and the Todd. By now, the animators have started drawing ribs onto our protagonists, and as if things weren't dire enough when caught red-handed with a dead chicken in their mouths, the humans are too scared to even shoot the dogs for fear of having to handle the potentially plague-infected corpses, despite the dogs not actually being infected with the plague. To me, this is one of the film's most heartbreaking scenes, and truly shows that our protagonists have become plague dogs in the eyes of the general public. As the film progresses, snow starts to fall, and we are given another gut-wrenching moment of dialogue in the film.
You suppose they've done it?
To try and kill us, I suppose. make it too cold for us to live.
The dogs believe that the snow is falling as part of their pursuit by the humans. They think that the natural weather patterns of northwest England are thereby designed to stifle their survival. They believe at first that this is so the humans can follow their footprints. We then get to see our protagonist raid a parked car, and the two now skinny canines get some much-needed food, while the expository dialogue tells of the encounter from the perspective of the man who owns the car, giving an interview to the local media, intercut with photographs taken during what the man in the media describe as an attack. I love the way this scene continues to experiment with narrative structure and the expository elements the film frequently uses, while expanding on how these dogs are being portrayed by the media, which helps set up what is to come. The marksman, named only in the film as Ackland, continues to stalk the pair. Eventually, the two starving dogs watch a buzzard circling them in the snow as the sniper takes aim at them with his rifle, ironically stating they hope the buzzard waits until they are dead to eat their flesh. Just as the gunman is about to pull the trigger, the Todd makes a dramatic return and jumps on him in the nick of time, startling him, causing him to miss his shot and fall off the cliff. He does not survive the fall. But there are even more gruesome implications implied when the search and rescue helicopter follows the dog tracks through the snow to the site of the fall, where it is revealed that the dogs and their cunning fox friend have literally eaten the flesh of the gunmen sent out to hunt them in order to survive for a few more days during the winter months when the sheep have all been taken out of the pastures. Some call this scene way over the line and far too gory. I disagree, as it is this grim discovery that serves to become the impetus for the very quickly rising action and stakes of this final act of the story. Without the Air Force discovering this scene, the audience has little reason to believe the government of the United Kingdom would get involved in the story of two runaway dogs. If there were some stray dogs killing sheep in the Lake District, as a farmer character says in the pub scene earlier in the film, no one would care. However, since these dogs have killed and eaten a man after apparently terrorizing the local population for weeks, and it turns out they are from a lab doing experiments with the plague, and no one can 100% say for certain they aren't carrying a disease that could kill thousands or potentially millions of people were it to get out, I think it's not only believable, but realistic to suppose you would see swift government intervention, especially during an election year. Ralph apologizes to the Todd for chasing him off before, in a very earned and believable character change. It seems Ralph has come around not only to trust the Todd, but to appreciate him also.
I'm sorry, it was...
No need to be sorry about anything.
But if it wasn't for you, I'd be dead now.
At this point in the story, things actually start getting bad. As if they weren't nightmarish enough before, there were still light-hearted moments sparsely scattered about. We'll chuckle no longer. It's all downhill from here. While the trio makes their way to the sea, we come to understand through the film's favorite expositionary tool, dialogue over footage of characters traveling, as well as the only footage of Dr. Goodwin, the scientist who is studying the bubonic plague within the Animal Research Scientific and Experimental Laboratory, humorously shortened to ARS in the novel, that these dogs have caused enough problems to be discussed by politicians in the House of Lords, and the speaker tells us they are sending in the full-blown army to hunt down and kill these two dogs. They send in Major Patrick Stewart. Yes, that Patrick Stewart, a few years before his breakout role on Star Trek, to lead a battalion of soldiers to exterminate Snitter and Ralph.
B Company will go 3 miles down the valley to Esdale Green, where they'll deploy 2 platoons north of the river and 2 south.
At this point, Snitter is having a complete nervous breakdown.
Flies out of my head. Look. They've grown huge. They're circling round and round over the hill.
And Ralph's fighting spirit begins to fade.
We don't need that just now.
He knows what he's doing, that one. We've never been very good at being wild, have we?
We just started too late.
The Todd runs interference while our depressing and dynamic duo makes a run for the train. And while I don't totally buy this element of the story, I've seen enough internet memes about city animals riding subways and buses and what have you that I kind of believe it. The audience's disbelief is suspended just enough for this train to get through the army blockade. Plus, at this point, we really want something good to happen to these two dogs. The dogs do make it to the train, but unfortunately the Todd is bitten and eventually killed by the German shepherds brought in by the army. But in a further demonstration of his character arc, Ralph says,
You'll never catch him. He's too crafty.
but the moment they get off the train, they are immediately pursued again by a helicopter and eventually foot soldiers as they make it to the beach. Okay, look, I'm not going to give you a spoiler warning for the end of this video because if you're going to watch this movie, you should be aware of the ending. It's got some really serious mental health impactability going on, and if you are easily affected by sad things, or you are already crying or on the verge of tears, just stop right here. I won't blame you. I don't care. I'll even placate you with a made-up happy ending to sweeten the deal. The dogs raid a picnic basket left on the beach, and Major Patrick Stewart finds them inside the basket, and even though he's been ordered to shoot them, he adopts them instead and takes them back to the military base where they become therapy dogs for veterans who suffer from the same mental health issues they have dealt with, coming full circle and returning home having changed. The end. Roll credits. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Okay, for the 2% of you still watching, here is the real ending of The Plague Dogs. Snitter has a serious break with reality and states,
Look out there! It's our island. Don't you see it? That's where we have to go. We can be free.
and walks out into the ocean. Making a further demonstration of his character's change throughout the movie, Ralph eventually follows Snitter into the largest example of the thing he hates the most on this earth, an ocean of water. A heavy fog bank rolls in, and Snitter begins to doubt his own vision of the island, and complains that he can't feel his legs. And as the pair continues to swim into the thick fog, Ralph comforts him by delivering the most powerful line of dialogue in the film.
There he is. There. Can't you see it? Our island. Just stay with me. I'll get you there.
After which our pair disappears into the fog bank, and credits roll over a sad gospel song about dying and letting go. The credits play over a shot of an island as the sun slowly comes out of the fog, so there is some argument to be made that the pair does make it to that island. However, this movie being so grounded in reality and unflinchingly real, it's pretty easy to see if there is a real-life island off the coast of the Lake District National Park where the film takes place. And there is. Some 20 or so miles away, 6 times the distance a dog can swim, there is an island. Although, as the novel the film is based on ironically points out, this is not the Isle of Dog as Snitter hoped it would be, but in fact, the Isle of Man, delivering the film's final gut punch to anyone who is stupid enough to still have hope and smart enough to use a map. And so, our story closes the same way it started, with a dog drowning, returning home, having changed. Whew, alright, that's it. Let's take a minute, take a deep breath. Here's the video of a lawnmower that flies. Here's the moon theme from DuckTales. That's good, yeah? Okay, let's finish this video essay. I only have a couple possible gripes with this film, but when I delve a little deeper into them, I struggle to even raise them as gripes. But for the sake of whatever the opposite of brevity is, I will mention my thoughts on them here. Gripe the first. The black lab, Ralph, has a tough face to read. The black on black eyes are difficult to make out at times, but at the same time, this is kind of haunting. Only being able to be seen by the glint of white light reflecting on the moist ocular surface, it is at the same time arresting for being frustrating and an image of inherent power for forcing the audience's imagination to fill in the blanks as it is naturally programmed to do. But on top of that, the slight head moves being able to give depth and definition to a shape that is in fact two-dimensional is an example of a master at work at the animation table. So what was initially a gripe ends up being a reason I like this film's animation even more. Even the very limited use of the whites of Ralph's eyes serve to build up the strength of their character. While on the subject of character design, I have to mention that on top of Ralph having a haunting face with glistening eyes that stick in your mind long after the film is over, none of the film's characters have an outline, and inner lines are often avoided unless the artist wants to draw attention to some detail. This leaves the film looking really clean in a very strange and at times unsettling way. Not many animated films do this. Samurai Jack is one example, and while this is most likely an evolution of some of the jazz-like experimentations of UPA in the 1950s, The Plague Dogs brings a level of unrealized realistic potential to the unoutlined school of thought in the realm of animation. Gripe the second, that's right, we're back to griping now, is that the film's storyline is a little hard to follow due to the expositionary dialogue mostly being played over semi-related animations. And also, the film's storyline doesn't follow the book very well, as pointed out by the most common one-star review I found in my minimal amount of research for this video. Especially towards the end, where the dogs are not rescued and don't get to live happily ever after. First off, yes, this film's weakest aspect is probably the way it handles exposition. However, on repeat viewings you begin to realize that it's all there, and it isn't as convoluted as you might have felt on your first viewing. You just missed a few bits here or there, maybe you made the wrong inference or looked away and missed a shot that told you something instead of something just coming out of the dialogue. But it all fits together really well in a package that doesn't want much suspension of disbelief because of how unflinchingly serious and realistic it handles its subject matter. The film is packed with verisimilitude and holds up really well to logical scrutiny. And on the subject of the film's ending, as far as I can tell, this was not only the original intended ending for the book by Richard Adams, but the filmmaker Martin Rosen was personal friends with Adams and was no doubt given an early draft of the book that would later be published in 1977, sometime during the production of another animated Richard Adams book adaptation, Watership Down, which was being made from 1975 up until the film's release in 1978. Production on The Plague Dogs would begin the following year, and despite the book's editor demanding that a happier ending be written for the novel, the film's production lead, Martin Rosen, made no such concessions and later stated that this was exactly the film he wanted to make. 18 minutes would be cut from this film before it was released in America, 3 years after it finished production. This movie is beautiful and powerful. It has a lot to say and speaks for itself as a mature film, deserving to be added to the canon of animated masterpieces, alongside the likes of The Iron Giant, WALL-E, Shrek, and even Akira. It sticks with you and it doesn't let go. It makes a powerful impact on the viewer and breaks the mold of how animated films depict trauma. Trauma isn't a big fat tear rolling down a kid's face after they've been kidnapped and forced to try to steal a diamond from a constantly flooding tidal cavern before they are saved by magical talking mice. Trauma is that kid struggling to adapt and move on from that traumatic experience with or without the aid of talking mice. Trauma is that kid's new caregiver struggling to understand the ways that this child they have adopted is managing to cope with being chased by alligators through a swamp and adapt to a new, unfamiliar, although seemingly safe life. Trauma isn't often shown in films, and if it is, it's often for the wrong reasons, usually through an unrealistic lens, and almost never as part of a character arc. I believe that Mad Max Fury Road is an excellent exception to this, but that's unfortunately not what we're talking about today. I'm talking about The Plague Dogs. The Plague Dogs' bleak ending is not the ending of the book, but it is the ending the author originally intended to write before he was forced into writing a happier one by his editor. I believe that the bleak ending of this film, coupled with the mature themes and unflinching dedication to realism present throughout the work alone, make it a marvel of animation. In a world where even the kid in the road got a happy ending, I am often left wondering, why doesn't more media show us realistically bad endings to stories that begin realistically bad and get worse from there? Why does Hollywood and big television keep telling people that if you aren't happy, you've done something wrong? If you're pure enough, magic talking mice will come to save you. But if the mice don't come, then it has to be because you weren't good enough. I think the logic really boils down to something simple. If your story isn't happy or lacks a happy ending, then it isn't marketable to the public as a whole. And if it isn't marketable, it won't make money. And if it won't make money, then yours is a story that's not worth telling. Personally, I do not believe in this logic. My life experiences tell me otherwise, and if you are like me and reject this thinking also, then I encourage you to pick up this film on Blu-ray and give it a shot. The extended cut of the film has been out there since January 2019, and if the user reviews online are of any indication, then I think this film will someday be recognized as the mature, cinematic masterpiece that it truly and has always been, and not just a shock horror box office bomb meant only to terrorize young children with. I watched this movie when I was really depressed, and I think it's that numbness that has allowed me to connect so well with these characters. Even though they have such a slim chance of survival, and any life they do have will be spent chased by incomprehensible forces beyond their perception, and every day will be a struggle to survive. Even though they can't see the island, they have no idea what that island really is or what it means. They have to try to get there, even if they can't. But they have to at least try, for each other. It's very possible that the edits made to the original theatrical release of this film in the United States hindered the audience's and critics' ability to understand the plot and kept them from fully suspending their disbelief, making the film seem simply grim for the sake of being grim. However, as I have stated before, and I will state again, I don't think bleakness or darkness, trauma or tragedy invalidates a story from being good, and sometimes a bad ending, or just the lack of a happy ending, can leave us with a lot more to feel and think about than one where everything works out fine for everyone. The full 108-minute version of this film was finally made available in the United States in 2019, 37 years after it was completed, thanks to a 2K transfer from a copy owned by the film's director, Martin Rosen, whom after this film bombed financially, never made another animated movie, which I think is a huge loss to the world of animation since this film looks gorgeous, and even on its low budget was able to accomplish so much. It's a hard to watch film, but if you're able to stick it out and hear its powerful message about perseverance and hope in the face of hopelessness, then I think you will see, like I have, that this film is an animated masterpiece. Animation is a dream. There are no limits in animation. You can do anything or be anyone or anything. You aren't held by the same constraints as in the real world. And this is an animated film that isn't a cartoon. It's an animation that feels real. And I think that's what drove people away from it. They weren't yet ready to see a dream that was real.
Time and tide are flowing over me. I once was blind, but now I see. The answer lies within your heart. Memories are only about the past. The present time will never last. The future lies within your heart. I don't feel no pain no more. I don't feel no pain no more. I've left this cruel world behind. I found my peace of mind. I don't feel no pain no more. Yes, I know I'm going home. Yes, I know.
I could talk about this film for hours, but all things must come to an end. If you would like to see me make more videos talking about things I find interesting and unique, please consider donating to my Patreon, as I have more than likely used far too many film clips for YouTube to monetize this video, which took several months to write and edit, and cost over $300 to produce at a level I felt comfortable with. I do not expect to make this money back, but if I can leave this world having done only one good thing, I hope that changing people's perspective about trauma in media and real life is it. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your interest.